Shabbat Shalom. I want to share with you tonight a story I found on the internet. It's a true story. Really, it's a true story. It's from an article from 8 years ago that was written in a daily newspaper printed in Portland, Oregon. Oddly enough, the newspaper is called the Oregonian. The writer, Tom Hallman, tells a story about an email he received 2 years after writing a different article about a man named James Atterbury. And by the way, since this story was published using the real names of the people involved, I felt I might as well use their real names as well tonight. So Hallman, the newspaper writer, received an email from a 51-year-old gentleman named Larry Israelson. The email read as follows: "You published an article involving retired teacher James Atterbury. Mr. Atterbury was a teacher of mine in the early 1970s, and I wish to apologize to him for a regrettable incident that occurred when I was his student. Can you provide any contact information for him, or would you be willing to serve as an intermediary and deliver a message on my behalf? Thank you for your time. I await your reply." What would you do if you received an email like that? Well, Tom Hallman dug around, found the article he had written a couple of years earlier about Atterbury, and he then reached out to the place where Atterbury volunteered, which was actually the subject of the article that Hallman had written about. Sure enough, they were able to give Hallman contact information for Atterbury, and Hallman called him up and told him he had received this really strange, weird, cryptic email. Was Atterbury interested in pursuing the matter? And Atterbury said, sure. So Hallman then contacted Larry Israelson and said he would be delighted to relay the information. But Israelson did not want to disclose the details, and instead he sent an overnight package to Hallman with a sealed envelope so that Hallman could address the envelope to Atterbury. Hallman eventually discovered the details of the mystery because he included them in his article in the Oregonian. So here they are. Turns out that almost 40 years earlier, Larry Israelson was 12 years old and a student in middle school in Southern California. And James Atterbury was his teacher for history and composition. Larry apparently wrote very well for his age, and Atterbury would always mark his papers with remarks about how brilliant his writing was. Larry was clearly one of his best students. But Mr. Atterbury was also gay. And in 1972 in Southern California, to be openly gay was not only to be subjected to ridicule and abuse, it almost certainly meant losing your job. Larry Israelson, on the other hand, was a scrawny little kid, according to his own accounts, who wore glasses and was into books. He lived in a beach town, yet he couldn't get a tan. He was always very pale. And a lot of the athletic guys loved to tease those who were weak. So Larry bore the brunt of adolescent abuse. And the fact that he was a kind of teacher's pet in Mr. Atterbury's class was noticed by his classmates, who also suspected that Mr. Atterbury was gay. Larry himself was not gay, but that did not stop the other kids from making rude remarks about both of them. Thank goodness we live in a different world today. In any case, at one point, Larry couldn't take the abuse from his classmates any longer, so he asked the principal to be transferred to a different teacher's class. The principal was surprised and curious about Larry's request, but Larry refused to talk about it. So the principal signed a transfer slip and handed it to Larry, who then walked into Atterbury's classroom, interrupted the class, handed Atterbury the slip, and without a word, he gathered his books and walked out the door. There was no goodbye, no explanation. "I just disappeared," Israelson said, "and I never talked to Mr. Atterbury again." And that's what haunted Larry Israelson for decades. So he wrote his teacher an apology nearly 40 years later. "The issue had been gently nagging at the back of my brain," Israelson wrote. He said he was truly sorry for asking to be transferred. "I know my age was a mitigating factor, but when I replayed the incident in my adult head, it shamed me. Since that realization, I have felt like I owed you an apology. He sealed the envelope and he sent it to Tom Hallman, who then forwarded it to Atterbury. Atterbury, meanwhile, had always wondered why Israelson had left his class. Had he been the problem? Was it something he did or said to this student? Now he knew. He set the letter aside. He went to his own computer. He typed in Israelson's name in the search box. And sure enough, he found the address and a telephone number. More than 1,000 miles away, a phone rang. A man answered. "Larry?" A voice on the other end said, "This is your teacher." A good feature story, Tom Hallman wrote, is about something universal. When it comes to apologies, no one gets a pass in this life. Everyone deserves one, and everyone needs to give one. When I mentioned this letter Hallman wrote to people, I found a story more universal than I had ever written in many years. Everyone told me they had someone they wished they could apologize to, and they told me that by the time they realized the truth, it was too late. So I have a story too, and it's also about a teacher. When I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher I actually liked. He used to take walks around the perimeter of the public elementary school that I attended in Tucson, Arizona, and he would walk before class started. And I guess he needed the exercise, so occasionally I'd walk with him and we'd just talk about stuff. And frankly, I have no memory about what we talked about. But one day, I was upset about something in class, and I wrote him a note that was really not so nice. And then, I actually gave it to him. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why I did that, and I immediately felt terrible about it. And it bothered me even after I went on to junior high school. So one day after school, I went back to my elementary school, I found him in his classroom, and I apologized for having written such a stupid and insensitive note. And he said, "You know, I don't remember that at all." I always kind of suspected that he really did remember it. I mean, how could he have forgotten? And to this day, I still think it was his way of telling me not to worry about it. But in any case, I felt tremendous relief at having apologized. We all have stories that we could tell about asking for forgiveness. I have many more that I won't tell you, at least not tonight. But we also all have stories about people who have asked us for forgiveness. And probably many more stories of times we felt we were hurt and the person did not ask our forgiveness. As Tom Hallman notes in his article, forgiveness is a universal story. Everyone needs to apologize to someone or to many people because we all make mistakes. When making an apology, here's some advice I found in an article from myjewishlearning.com, which is a wonderful website, by the way, myjewishlearning.com. Check it out. Anyway, it turns out there's a man named Everett Worthington who is a psychologist, and he actually specializes in forgiveness. And he teaches at Virginia Commonwealth University, and he created an acronym to help people remember the steps that are required for a meaningful request for forgiveness. And the acronym spells out confess. So here they are. C, confess without excuse. Be specific about what you're sorry for. I'm sorry, I forgot our anniversary. Do not offer any excuse. Do not let the word but come out of your mouth. Just apologize. Confess without an excuse. O, offer an apology that gets across the idea that you're sorry and you won't do it again. Be sincere and articulate. N, note the other person's pain. Acknowledge that your actions were hurtful. F, forever value. Explain that you value your relationship and you want to restore it more than you want to hang on to your pride. E, equalize. Offer retribution. Ask how you can make it up to the other person. S, say never again. Promise you won't do it again and mean it. And finally, the last S, seek forgiveness. Ask the other person directly, can you forgive me? But here's another important piece of advice from Dr. Worthington. Don't expect that you will necessarily be forgiven right away. Worthington says that there are basically 4 ways people respond to requests for forgiveness. 1, yeah, I forgive you. 2, I need more time. 3, I can make a decision to forgive you, but I'm still hurt. And 4, nope, there's nothing you can ever do to make it right. I don't forgive you. The second and third responses are the most common. I need more time, or I can forgive you, but I'm still hurt. Don't assume that after you make your apology, everything's going to be reconciled. Reconciliation is not something that's granted, it's earned. You should expect to have to prove you're sincere. In the Jewish tradition, you may know, you're supposed to seek forgiveness for up to 3 times and use witnesses. Why are you supposed to bring witnesses? Not for legal reasons. It's so that you are admitting that you did something wrong in public. It's not just privately to the person that you wronged. You're admitting to others that you did something wrong and you regret it. And that is a much more powerful statement. Tomorrow night, we're going to begin the practice of formally seeking forgiveness for the mistakes that we have made during the past year. The service is called Slichot, which comes from the Hebrew word for forgiveness. Ideally, we should be seeking forgiveness from God and the people we have hurt all year long. But now we're going to make an extra effort to repair our relationships. And just as we seek forgiveness from others, we should also consider being generous and kind to others when they ask us for forgiveness. Forgiveness, as Rabbi Fort said in her message this morning, is about recognizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes sometimes. We don't have to like what someone did to us, but hopefully, if they're sincere in their attempt to repair relationships, we can recognize their humanity and their human frailty. And just as we hope that God understands when we make mistakes, we too can understand and forgive others when they make mistakes. As the great English poet Alexander Pope said, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Shabbat Shalom, L'Shana Tova.